What started as a routine late-night interview turned into television chaos when Jimmy Kimmel confronted Usher with explosive allegations about his past connections to controversial industry parties, leading to an unprecedented on-air breakdown. Jimmy Kimmel, live studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as audience members settled into their seats, expecting another light-hearted evening of celebrity banter and comedy sketches. Usher Raymond, dressed in a sleek black suit, sat comfortably in the guest chair, flashing his trademark smile as the cameras rolled. The R&B superstar had appeared on the show multiple times over the years, and tonight was supposed to promote his upcoming Vegas residency and reflect on his decades-long career. Kimmel opened with his typical monologue, cracking jokes about current events before introducing his guest with enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, he's sold over 80 million records worldwide. He's a multiple Grammy winner, and he's here to talk about his exciting new show in Vegas. Please welcome Usher." The audience erupted in applause as Usher waved, seemingly relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be standard promotional interview fare. The first few minutes proceeded normally, with Kimmel asking about the Vegas residency, Usher's latest music, and some light conversation about his family life. The R&B icon appeared animated and engaging, sharing anecdotes about his rehearsal process and expressing gratitude for his loyal fan base. But something shifted in Kimmel's demeanor as the interview progressed. His usual comedic timing gave way to more pointed questions, and his expression grew increasingly serious. The studio audience began to sense the change in atmosphere, with murmurs rippling through the crowd as Kimmel's line of questioning took an unexpected turn. "You know, Usher," Kimmel said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, "there's been a lot of talk lately about the entertainment industry and some of the parties that went on back in the day, particularly around the early 2000s and 2010s. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I'm curious about your thoughts on some of the allegations that have been surfacing." Usher's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Jimmy, I think it's important that people feel safe to speak their truth. The industry has definitely evolved, and I'm glad we're having these conversations about accountability." Kimmel nodded, but his expression remained stern. "That's a diplomatic answer, but I'm talking about something more specific here." He leaned forward in his chair, his voice becoming more confrontational. "There are reports, photographs, witness accounts of you at certain parties hosted by Sean Combs, Diddy, during that era. Parties where some pretty questionable things allegedly went down." The studio fell silent. Usher's body language shifted noticeably, his shoulders tensing as he processed the unexpected accusation. "Jimmy, I'm not sure what you're getting at here. I went to industry events like everyone else in the business. That's part of networking and maintaining professional relationships." "Professional relationships?" Kimmel's voice rose slightly, drawing uncomfortable glances from his production crew. "We're talking about parties where there were allegations of inappropriate conduct, where young artists were allegedly put in compromising situations. And according to multiple sources, you weren't just a casual attendee. You were seen in private areas in what some witnesses described as hookup rooms with other celebrities." The accusation hit like a thunderbolt. Usher's face flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing an elaborate setup or a genuine confrontation. Camera operators continued filming, but several crew members exchanged worried glances, sensing that the interview had crossed into uncharted territory. "Hold up," Usher said, his voice sharp with indignation. "You're going to sit here on national television and make accusations about me based on rumors and gossip? This is completely unprofessional, Jimmy. I came here to talk about my music and my show, not to be ambushed with tabloid nonsense." Kimmel didn't back down. "These aren't tabloid rumors, Usher. I have sources. I have information that suggests you were deeply involved in that scene. People are talking, and they're naming names. Your name keeps coming up in connection with some very disturbing allegations about what went on at those parties. The tension in the studio was palpable. Usher stood up from his chair, his hands clenched at his sides. This is insane. You're destroying your own credibility right now. Whatever sources you think you have, they're lying. I never participated in anything inappropriate, and I resent the implication that I did. Then explain the photographs, Kimmel shot back, pulling out what appeared to be printed images from behind his desk. Explain why you're seen going into private rooms with other celebrities at these parties. Explain why multiple witnesses remember seeing you there during some of the most questionable incidents. The confrontation was spiraling beyond anyone's control, and it was clear that neither man was backing down. Usher's eyes blazed with fury as he stared at the photographs Kimmel held up, his voice rising to match the host's aggressive tone. Those could be doctored, taken out of context, or completely unrelated to whatever narrative you're trying to spin here. You're acting like some kind of investigative journalist instead of a late-night talk show host, and frankly, it's pathetic. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pulling out their phones to record what was quickly becoming the most explosive late-night television moment in recent memory. Security personnel positioned themselves strategically around the studio, unsure whether they should intervene or let the confrontation play out. Kimmel's face reddened as Usher's words hit their mark. Pathetic? You want to know what's pathetic? What's pathetic is celebrities thinking they can get away with anything because of their fame and fortune. What's pathetic is the culture of silence that's protected people like you for years. People like me? Usher's voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of rage and hurt. You don't know anything about me, Jimmy. You're sitting here making character assassinations based on conspiracy theories and hearsay. This isn't journalism. This is a witch hunt, and you're destroying your own reputation in the process. The production team behind the cameras was in chaos. Producers frantically communicated through their headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation continue. The show's director made frantic hand gestures, unsure of the protocol for such an unprecedented situation. This was unscripted territory that none of them had prepared for. Kimmel stood up from behind his desk, matching Usher's aggressive posture. My reputation? Let's talk about your reputation, Usher. Let's talk about the young artists who looked up to you, who trusted you, who might have been influenced by your presence at these events. You had a responsibility, and according to my sources, you failed that responsibility spectacularly. Your sources are lying, Usher shouted, his composure completely shattered. I've spent my entire career mentoring young artists, giving back to my community, and building a legacy I'm proud of. I'm not going to let you destroy that with unfounded accusations and guilt by association. The studio audience was now completely silent, watching in stunned fascination as two entertainment industry figures engaged in what felt more like a courtroom cross-examination than a celebrity interview. Some audience members looked visibly uncomfortable, while others seemed transfixed by the raw emotion and conflict unfolding before them. Kimmel pressed forward relentlessly. Guilt by association? We're talking about your active participation. We're talking about witnesses who saw you engage in behavior that, at best, showed poor judgment, and at worst, was actively harmful to vulnerable people in the industry. Show me these witnesses, Usher demanded, his voice hoarse with anger. Bring them forward. Let them make these accusations to my face instead of hiding behind anonymous sources and decade-old gossip. You're conducting a public execution based on rumors, and it's disgusting. The host's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward. Some of these witnesses are afraid to come forward publicly because of the power you and others wielded in the industry. They're afraid of retaliation, afraid of being blacklisted, afraid of having their careers destroyed. But that doesn't make their accounts any less valid. Convenient excuse, Usher spat. Anonymous accusations that can't be verified or challenged. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior that destroys innocent people's lives. You're not seeking justice, you're seeking ratings, and you're willing to destroy anyone to get them. The tension reached a breaking point as both men stood facing each other across the interview space, their voices echoing through the studio. Kimmel's security team had moved closer, ready to intervene if the confrontation became physical, while Usher's own security detail remained alert but restrained. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy?" Usher's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his earlier shouting. "You used to be someone I respected. I thought you had integrity, that you cared about fairness and truth. But you've become nothing more than a tabloid hack willing to ambush guests with unsubstantiated allegations for cheap thrills." Kimmel's face contorted with anger. "And you've become exactly what's wrong with this industry. Celebrities who think they're above accountability, who believe their fame makes them untouchable. Well, those days are over, Usher. The world is watching, and people are finally ready to hold stars like you accountable for your actions." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both men's voices carrying across the stunned studio audience. Usher's chest heaved with each breath, as he stared down Kimmel, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. "You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability for what you're doing right now. You're destroying someone's reputation on live television without a shred of concrete evidence. Where's your accountability for that?" Kimmel's voice grew even more venomous. "The evidence is there for anyone willing to look. Multiple witnesses, photographic documentation, a pattern of behavior that speaks for itself. You can deny it all you want, but the truth has a way of coming out eventually." "Pattern of behavior?" Usher's laugh was bitter and hollow. "The only pattern I see here is your pattern of character assassination. You've ambushed me, blindsided me with accusations, and turned what should have been a professional interview into a public lynching. This is beyond unethical. It's criminal." The studio audience watched in horrified fascination as the two men continued their verbal warfare. Several audience members had begun recording with their phones, knowing they were witnessing television history in the making. The production crew remained frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation reach its natural conclusion. Kimmel pulled out additional papers from his desk, waving them dramatically. "I have affidavits here, Usher, sworn statements, from people who were there, who saw what happened. Are you calling all of them liars?" "I'm calling you a liar," Usher exploded, his voice echoing through the studio with such force that several audience members visibly jumped. "You're a desperate has-been trying to stay relevant by destroying better men than yourself. You've lost your creative edge. Your ratings are tanking, and now you're resorting to tabloid journalism to save your dying career." The personal attack struck deep, and Kimmel's face flushed purple with rage. "My career? At least I built my career on my own talent instead of cozying up to predators and enablers. At least I can sleep at night knowing I didn't turn a blind eye to abuse for the sake of my image." "That's it," Usher roared, ripping off his wireless microphone and hurling it to the ground where it landed with a sharp crack. "I'm done with this circus. You want to spread lies and destroy reputations? Do it without me." The R&B superstar turned toward the exit, but Kimmel wasn't finished. "Running away won't make the truth disappear, Usher. The world deserves to know what kind of person you really are." Usher spun around one final time, his eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to burn through the television cameras. "The world knows exactly what kind of person I am. Through my music, my philanthropy, my decades of contribution to this industry. They don't need a washed-up comedian to tell them anything about my character." With that final devastating blow, Usher stormed toward the studio exit, his security team quickly flanking him as he pushed through the backstage area. The studio audience sat in shocked silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Several crew members scrambled to retrieve the broken microphone and restore some semblance of order to the chaotic scene. Kimmel stood alone at his desk, his face a mixture of satisfaction and concern, as he realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice slightly shaky as he attempted to regain control of his show, "that was Usher, everybody. We'll be right back after these messages." As the show cut to commercial, the studio erupted in confused chatter. Audience members turned to each other in disbelief, while production assistants rushed around trying to manage the fallout from the unprecedented confrontation. Kimmel's producers immediately began damage control, knowing that the explosive interview would dominate headlines within hours. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within minutes of the show's conclusion, social media platforms exploded with clips and commentary about the confrontation. The hashtag Usher Kimmel Showdown began trending worldwide as viewers shared their shock and opinions about what they had witnessed. Entertainment news outlets scrambled to provide analysis and context for the explosive interview. By morning, the incident had sparked widespread discussion about journalistic ethics, celebrity accountability, and the boundaries of acceptable behavior on television. Critics argued that Kimmel had crossed professional lines by ambushing his guest with unsubstantiated allegations, while others praised him for asking difficult questions that needed to be addressed. The controversy proved costly for Kimmel's show, as several major sponsors pulled their advertising in response to viewer complaints about the host's conduct. Ratings for subsequent episodes dropped significantly as audiences questioned whether they could trust the show's editorial judgment. Network executives found themselves fielding calls from angry advertisers and concerned stakeholders about the show's future direction. Usher, meanwhile, released a statement through his representatives condemning the interview as a reckless ambush designed to generate controversy at the expense of truth and basic human decency. His legal team hinted at possible defamation action, while his publicists worked overtime to counter the negative narrative that had emerged from the confrontation. The incident ultimately served as a cautionary tale about the importance of journalistic integrity and professional conduct in the entertainment industry. It highlighted the fine line between holding public figures accountable and engaging in destructive character assassination, demonstrating how quickly a routine celebrity interview could spiral into a career-defining controversy that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling.